So we're about halfway through the summer season at this point, and this is where it starts to get a little bit more difficult to talk about these shows episodically, to have really new things to say, because they've all kind of hit their stride, they're trucking along. A lot of the anime I'm watching this season are based on longer running manga, so I'm not really expecting there to be any crazy plot twists or anything like that, in episode 6. There were some shows that had some interesting things happen, but at this point we have a pretty good sense of the overall quality of these shows, unless any of them is going to take a dramatic dip. I think we're fairly set in stone that we've got the shows we're going to be following for the rest of the season, or I do anyway. And I'm also sure that at this point, either you are listening to me talk about these shows just to vicariously enjoy them through me, or you are already watching them. So I'm not going to bother with all of the editing that I've been doing in these. I know some people really enjoy that. I would encourage you to just tab over and listen to this if you don't feel like watching a vlog. But frankly, it doesn't really add that much to the video in my mind to have the occasional clips in there. I wanted to do that mostly to show people what these shows looked like. By now, you should know. These videos, they're a little weird for me because the mid-season stuff, these videos are not going to age well. These are not going to really have any reason to come back to them once the season is over and you can just hear my full thoughts on these shows. So again, basically this is a very time and place thing that only really exists so that those of you watching these shows week by week can have someone to help you digest them or bounce your feelings of the shows off of me, I guess. Whatever the case may be. So I'm going to go through this time and do it day by day. Today's Wednesday when I'm recording this, which is when new episodes of Dumbbell Nankilo Moteru come out. I am still watching that show, but I haven't been talking about it just because I think that show is even more so than anything else, pretty much the same thing episode after episode, so there's not really much need to comment on it further. But Thursdays are when Given airs, and I had somehow missed a week of Given. I'm not sure how. I had missed episode 4. I'm all caught up, 4 and 5. Tomorrow 6 comes out, but whatever. Given has remained really solid, and I'm actually really happy that it finally has kind of gone all in on the BL element of the show. So episode 4 was more of that K-On! Feel. In fact, it might have been the most K-On!-esque episode of the show yet, where the characters are going to guitar shops to shop for pedals. Just the way these scenes play out are so similar to, like, K-On! Episode 2 when they go to the guitar store. It was really fucking funny to me. And I just really enjoy the dialogue in this show, the tone of it, so it's always fun to hang around with these characters. I really like all of them and their chemistry together, but things have gotten a lot more interesting now that we've particularly gotten into the heads of the two other band members, the sort of side characters who up to this point have just kind of been around. But as we learn in these couple of episodes, one of them is in love with the other. He has been in love with him since before they even started the band. So, like, the whole time he's been harboring these feelings, probably not really assuming that the guy is gay or that he, would have any returned interest in him. But the way that his feelings towards that guy are portrayed is fucking adorable. Like, the squeeing fangirl, attitude he has towards the guy on the interior. The way that, like, when he sees him from the side for the first time, he's just like, wow, his profile is really hot. Like, I can't believe I'm sitting next to him. And, like, this is so cool. Just that excitement that he has is, it's a lot of fun. It's like a refreshing way to portray, a refreshingly realistic way to portray romantic attraction in an anime. I don't feel like I see a lot of characters who just kind of think the way a normal person would when they're attracted to somebody. So that's pretty entertaining, and their relationship is just kind of adorable, and we of course learn that there's a secret in the midst that the other guy is not only gay but has somebody living with him, so that could lead to some further drama. We don't even know anything about that guy. And then we also have the dramatic revelation of what's really been going on with our lead guitarist, or not lead guitarist, but our lead singer, rather. who has been, this mopey, airheaded kid throughout the whole show so far. And it turns out that he's also gay and had been dating another guy in middle school who killed himself. So it's been pretty obvious that someone close to this character had, died before the start of the series, but I was expecting it to be like his brother died in a tragic accident. There's a lot more gravitas to the idea that it was someone he was with and that they killed themselves, because the amount of, blame he would probably be feeling on himself for that is a lot more enormous. So, this of course, when the main character, I suppose he's the main character, when he learns about this, he is quite shaken. And it's really interesting that the way it's presented to him by the girl who likes him and is jealous of the fact that he hangs out with this gay guy is she tells him, you should look out for him. Like, she is suspicious of the fact that this guy is, probably partly suspicious that he's gay and also suspicious that his boyfriend killed himself. So, which is, it paints her in a pretty negative light in my mind. Like, my reaction is like, oh, you bitch. But then it's also like, well, I understand why she would think she wants to look out for this guy who has been hanging out with this dude a lot, who potentially contributed to this other dude's suicide, or at least, could have some effect of it. It's affecting him in some way. Oftentimes people who commit suicide are ones who were around somebody who committed suicide, so there are understandable reasons to be concerned, but obviously our guy, as she says, that is not paying attention to her at all and is just zeroed in on what he's just learned. Dramatic way to end the episode. Pretty nice, given still one of the best shows of the season. So moving on from there to the Friday shows, we of course have, is there anything? Yeah, Accelerator and Dr. Stone. Accelerator continues to be Accelerator. It's total fucking madness. It is unhinged, crazy shit. And episode 5 was pretty much just like a long action scene. And I've pretty much been feeling the same way about this show every time I talk about it, which is that there are things I like about it, but it's not good. And this episode is a perfect example of that, because the fight scene is definitely, by no definition, good. It's not particularly well animated or choreographed. There's tons of just ridiculous moments that are goofy or look stupid or might make you laugh. And the weirdest part about it is that, a lot of fucking people get killed, but for some reason, it never shows anybody, getting hit. It just shows blood sprays. The camera will you'll see, a gun shooting, and then a guy about to get hit, and then a cut to just a spray of blood, but no shot of the body getting hit, which is the good part of violence. You don't care about the blood spray afterwards, but it just shows a lot of blood without showing anybody bleeding. It's really goofy. So, there's spider tanks, and there's fucking people with crazy powers. There's a girl who takes on what would I describe it as? It's like she has a mech suit that is a stuffed animal, but she's naked in the middle of it, or barely dressed in the middle of this exosuit stuffed animal thing. There's a girl who can control the friction coefficient of things that she touches, so she can control how much friction something has. That's a neat power. Not really used for anything exceptionally interesting in this episode, but it's neat. You've got characters all over the place. Everybody's converging on one spot. It's just a big fucking battle. It's ridiculous. It's not the best, but it's still enough fun that it made me still feel like I could keep watching the show and just figure out where the hell it's going. So then there was also, of course, Dr. Stone. And this episode started off kind of slow because it was still just recapping the backstory of what happened with Senku after he woke up. Some of it was a bit redundant, not really stuff we needed more explanation on, but, it lends more emotional gravity to the scene. It definitely feels like Because people have told me that in the original manga, it was not so clear that Senku was going to be the main character up to this point. I mean, personally, I think the fact that the manga is called Dr. Stone, and that the entire concept of it is that they're going to be using science to rebuild society, makes it pretty fucking obvious he wasn't going to die when he did, but, you know, when they faked it. But I guess that the idea would be that if you didn't think of him as the main character, you thought of him as somebody who could die, then after this point, we're sort of reestablishing everything from his perspective to represent him as the main character, to sort of say, okay, here's like, because we're going to be following Senku primarily from now on, so let's develop an even stronger emotional attachment to him. It's almost like we rebooted the story, and like that makes more sense when we look at the fact that the characters split up, which I did not see coming. That it becomes Taiju and Yuzuriha are going off to tail our villain and make sure, you know, they've got tabs on him, and then Senku is going off to do his own thing, and he runs into this fucking insanely hot blonde waifu who I guess is going to be his companion for a while. So I would assume that we're probably going to see a little bit less of Taiju and Yuzuriha for a while, or maybe we'll be cutting back and forth between the stories. But yeah, so this new blonde girl, she's apparently a native. So in other words, she is, you know, generations of like at some point either there have been human survivors all along, or there are people who, you know, came out of the stone centuries ago and have continued breeding and developed some kind of new, very basic civilization. But this girl belongs to something like that. So that's an interesting new story path opened up. The fact that she immediately is into Senku is great, because now he's got a waifu. She's really fucking hot. And the dramatic ending moment is about him building a pulley. And this is just the kind of moment that I love from this show is, you know, the excitement it has for a scientific advancement, even though it's one that's from our ancient history, you know, like, he builds a fucking pulley system. Hell yeah. And it's like, it just reminds me of when I took, like, a technology class in, like, I don't know, middle school, where we were going through the history of inventions, you know, just like what, like, basically we've been following the order, the exact order of human history of invention, but just doing it rapid fire, you know, one after another, with some skipping ahead here and there. But, you know, it's just fun to see that, like, the invention of a pulley would be, you know, a dramatic moment at the end of an episode. So then comes Saturday, which is Lord el-melloi II's case files. I think we've reached the end of the, like, introductory filler arc, because, you know, at the end of episode 6, we sort of have a suggestion that we are going to go to the Rail Zeppelin, where I assume some grace noting will happen. But this episode is about the, it's about Gray and her first real day out with, I guess, friends, hanging out with the el-melloi girl, the I guess niece of, or was she the younger sister of what's his name, Kenneth? I don't remember, but it's her, and then the fucking twirly-haired blonde rich girl, and they're hanging out, basically just doing what extremely rich people do, shopping at super high-end malls in London. And then they accidentally get trapped inside of some kind of, what are those things called? One of those things, you know what I'm talking about, where they're a bounded field. That's what they call it in this show. They get trapped in a bounded field. They're trying to figure out what's the cause. And there's definitely been a very consistent theme in these build-up episodes. I think it's trying to get us to, I don't know if this is going to spoil the mystery in the long run, but it's clearly trying to get us to think about the idea of, like, automatic systems, because it turns out that they weren't trapped here by any specific person. It's just that having so much magical shit in one location, I guess, created a reaction where just, like, it just so happened to be they got trapped in this place because of just the specific arrangement of random magical crap that was around. And, like, that's basically been the answer to every mystery in the show so far, has been, like, either it was the guy was doing it to himself, or the mechanism was just operating on its own. It's never been that somebody else was the killer. So, like, you know, but this one was a lot more lighthearted than previous episodes. It's fun to spend time with the cute girls and their catty banter. You know, they're all pretty cute. So if you just want to look at eye candy in this episode, that's the main appeal. There's some hilarious, cheesy English stuff, like the one girl saying, "Red, blue, green, serve your queen," or whatever she says, and then fires off all these little red, blue, and green missiles. And then she does a bunch of wrestling moves and says something about every girl has to do catch as catch can. Yeah, it's a weird episode. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I had a smile on my face. I wasn't paying total attention, but that's fine. It seems like the next episode is where the plot will actually start moving. So then we have the Sunday show was Vinland Saga, and I had actually recorded a 40-minute vlog about this episode of Vinland Saga based on a false premise, because I heard after the last episode that episode and this one were filler, that in the original manga it just cuts straight from Thor's death to, you know, the present day. What I had not realized that there is one chapter between that. There's only one chapter establishing Thorfinn's time with the pirate crew as he's growing up. And that chapter, I think, is perfect at encapsulating that era, telling a touching, interesting story that fits the themes of the show and makes a perfect bridge between these eras. And that is the second half of episode 6, which is great. The first half sucks. And so I made this video where I was talking about how what's interesting about this filler, this 2-episode filler arc, is that it's not necessarily terrible. It doesn't ruin the story in any way, but it does add things in that didn't need to be there and that you could conceive of as worse, as making the story ever so slightly worse or slightly harder to believe, just because a lot of the gaps it fills in are things that we didn't need filled in, and that they didn't fill in an interesting way. It didn't add anything to the characters other than to suggest that this kid got really good really fast. And I know there were people who said that in the previous episode when he's training with throwing the knife, more time had passed than I gave credit to, as you can tell by the leaves on the ground. But they didn't really establish how the kid is surviving throughout this period. We don't see a bunch of images of him hunting other animals and getting better that way. He had been completely fucking emaciated when he started this training. So it's it just didn't feel like a good way to summarize him getting stronger. It felt like a weird, cheap little offshoot, the most basic idea you could have for how that happened, and there was no need for it. It just doesn't need to be in the story. It wasn't in the original, and the original was fine without it. And even if you don't think this takes away from the story in any way, it just had no reason to be there. And I don't think that these scenes were animated the best, particularly the first half of episode 6. We really see the animation take a little bit of a hit. There's some not so great CG. There's panning shots where action is supposed to be happening, but characters are standing still. One shot where there's one guy who's just kind of has impaled a guy on the ground and is just kind of holding that pose while other people are moving around him. It's just none of this is terrible, but it just is easily avoidable. It's all stuff that could have not been there, and it would be better. And so, when we judge this as compared to the manga, it's hard not to come away with the conclusion that the manga just is better because it doesn't have these issues, regardless of the fact that, the anime does add some things in, color, soundtrack, stuff like that, but, ultimately it's a more difficult judgment to make on whether the anime lives up to the manga if you add in things that are unnecessary and that aren't as good. But the second half of episode 6 is great, and at the time I had thought it was just a filler episode all the way through, so I was presenting the case that this made it much more complicated to decide if it's better or worse than the manga, because it also adds in this really great scene that really speaks to the morals of the show. But it wasn't added in, it was in the original manga. So overall, I mean, that part rescues the episode. Like, episode 6 literally goes from being, like, mediocre to being great halfway through, and it's just because they adapted that chapter of the manga. So, yeah, I still stand by the statement that the episode and a half of extra content, while not terrible, not even bad, not even really noteworthy to that strong of an extent, other than that the manga didn't have it, and it's, you know, it was better off not having it. You know, nonetheless, the second half of the episode was great. I definitely appreciated the you know, the characterization it gives to Thorfinn as he sort of crosses a moral event horizon and realizes that he is a bad guy now, essentially. And I thought it was really artful the way that they handled, you know, the old woman's just sort of being wiped off screen by a character running in front of her. A very nice way to, like, symbolize the death without having to show it gratuitously. Just an all-around powerful scene. Great stuff. Can't wait for more Vinland Saga now that we're going to be back on the train of just covering the manga. I assume there won't be any more filler. People have speculated that they just added that in because it would be necessary to get it so that the manga, like, exactly ends at the end of, like, the prologue arc at the end of the season or something. Whatever. I'm willing to forgive this. I don't think, again, it's a big deal. I just think it's worth pointing out. Anyway, moving on to Monday, Arifureta. Oh boy! Arifureta was a recap episode this week, and it was so fucking funny because they recapped it in a way where they reordered the scenes to be chronological and had voiceover to explain what the fuck is going on. So basically this recap episode, like, I mean, I'm sure this was necessary because of production problems, which is usually what causes a recap episode, and it's no secret that this production is pretty turbulent. But man, it is a sorry state of affairs. And like, but it's really funny that they would use it as an opportunity to just like make the plot fucking make sense at all. But they didn't add anything in. Like, what would have been sincerely appreciated is a new episode that did this, that was a recap, but with new footage, with footage that showed the things that happened that were left out of the anime. Instead, you just have voiceover to fill in the gaps. So it's like, you know, Hajime explaining to you exactly what this scene was, or like just the one piece of knowledge that was missing that would be necessary to understanding what the hell's going on going forward. But yeah, it's a recap episode. There's like a 1 second fucking ending bit where it shows the new bunny girl character, just I guess to establish she'll be introduced soon if you've been waiting. But yeah, it was terrible and hilarious that they had to do that. But there you go. If you still don't understand what the hell's happening in Arifureta, now you do. Is there anything else I'm watching? I dropped Copcraft. Tuesday is Sonan Desu, which I don't really talk about, so I guess that's it, right? There still hasn't been a second translated episode of Business Fish yet, so if you're wondering why I haven't talked about that, it's just the subs are taking a long time. And yeah, that's it for this week. See you next week.